Hello there. See those two cars? Desoto and the Big M. At least that's what the Mercury folks call it. But I found out for myself the differences between these two cars. Beauty? Sure, that's an obvious difference. But under that more beautiful Desoto skin are some amazing performance differences. I went with the Ross-Roy test crew and watched a lot of certified road tests. And I did a lot of riding in them myself. We tested acceleration up a steep hill, engine braking down a steep hill, passing acceleration, ride qualities, and a dozen other things. I talked to the test engineers and dug out some technical information. Got the tape measure out a couple of times and, well, I guess I'm a pretty good tape measure myself. When I fit in a car, it's big. And I found out that when Mercury talks about being bigger, they must mean bigger than last year's Mercury. But let me show you what I mean. The difference starts as soon as you get in. The Desoto doorway is a little higher. That makes it easier for a big guy like me, or a lady with a big hat, or anybody who doesn't like to squeeze into their automobile. Then, as you sit down, you notice that Mercury's windshield post sticks into the doorway. Whether or not you happen to hit it with your knee, these 6 extra inches of getting in space make it easier for the Desoto owner. Then I get more leg room in a Desoto. I get more headroom in a Desoto. And I get more room here, between the steering wheel and my legs. We have more shoulder room, too. Now, maybe these dimensions don't thrill you, but remember, it's Mercury that's talking about big. But now we're looking at the facts. In the back seats, Desoto leads in headroom and shoulder room, while Mercury has a slight edge in leg room and hip room. From the outside, Desoto looks a lot longer. Actually, it's only 7 inches longer than Mercury. But folks on the street won't think in inches. They'll notice the low, flat Desoto hood and the flight sweep tail fins. They'll get a good impression from the thin Desoto roof and the low windowsill line. Bet they notice the blunt effect of Mercury's reverse angle windshield post, too, even before they try to duck around it getting in. Now, the Mercury is a trifle wider than the Desoto overall, but it sure doesn't look it. Actually, Desoto's lower hood and wide bumper sure make the car look wider than Mercury. And in fact, Desoto has a cleaner design with smooth, neat bumper guards and inset license housing and big signal tower taillights. All that against a Mercury rear end that's, well, kind of chopped up, don't you think? Especially with those taillights set at an odd angle. But I was talking about width, and I'd like to show you something. Look, big, huh? Well, maybe you won't be putting any bodies back here, but you can imagine golf clubs, luggage, everything will be a lot easier to stow away, especially with the new shelf formed by the spare tire. No packing bottleneck here. Now, look at Mercury. I won't even try to get in here. This trunk has 25.5 inches less usable width because of the spare tire mounting, and it's 4 inches shorter than the Desoto trunk, too. This box gives you an idea of how much smaller the Big M trunk is. 6 cubic feet. That's the difference. Now, I was talking about width. Maybe you can't see that the Desoto wheels are farther apart, but they are front and rear, and man, you can feel the difference. I mean, when you corner, some cars lean or sway. That can be mighty uncomfortable and dangerous if you happen to misjudge a curve and take it a little too fast. Now, want to see what happens when a Desoto and a Mercury take a curve at the same speed? I can show you with the official test track photographs. You'll see the action just as it happened. Here they come into the turn with both cars going 55 miles an hour on a curve marked for a 40-mile-an-hour maximum. Now they're rounding it. And right at this point, you can see the maximum amount of lean or tilt in each car. You can see that Desoto has a lot less lean than the Mercury, which means it's more comfortable and easier to control. Now, one reason the Desoto is more stable is that it has a wider tread. Another reason is Desoto's extremely low center of gravity. But even that's not all. Another reason for Desoto's better stability is that the Desoto Outrider rear springs are mounted farther apart than Mercury's, so they support the body better, make it harder for the body to sway when you take a curve. But the biggest reason of all for Desoto's rear end stability is that the rear axle itself, together with the tough forward sections of the rear springs, form an extremely rigid unit that acts just like a heavy stabilizer bar to resist body tilt or sway. And incidentally, did you know that Desoto's rear fender fins contribute to stability at highway speeds? Actual wind tunnel tests have proved that. So you see, those fins aren't for style alone. Now, here's another test for both comfort and safe control. Desoto and Mercury are approaching a bad bump at 45 miles an hour. And as they hit the bump, Mercury takes to the air, but the torsionaire suspension holds Desoto on the ground. They're over the bump, and both front ends are down. But Mercury's front end is way down, and notice that tire being squashed. Now, Desoto has entirely recovered. It's absolutely level. But now Mercury's front end bounces up. And here, finally, Mercury settles down to normal again. Pretty good performance for Desoto, don't you think? There are several reasons why it's so good. For one thing, Desoto's torsion springs are more efficient than the coil springs Mercury uses in front. You see, while the entire length of Desoto's torsion springs are at the job of soaking up the bumps and keeping the car level, only the mid portion of Mercury's coil springs are working. Then, too, Desoto's time-tested Oriflow shock absorbers have twice as much control on bad bumps as Mercury's ordinary shock absorbers. These photographs, which were made with lights attached to the bumper of a Desoto and a competitive car, give you a good picture of what I mean. Now, let's see how the Mercury looks in another test for comfort and control. Brake dip, or nosedive. We'll see that in Desoto, the tendency to nosedive on a stop has been greatly reduced. That was accomplished with what we call anti-dip upper control arms. You see, they're positioned on the frame so that the force that normally causes nosedive is changed into a lifting force. The result is a level stop. But let's watch the test. The flagman signals for both drivers to hit the brakes at 40 miles an hour. And now they're both braking hard. Now watch for the dip. See how low Mercury's front bumper is? And look at the difference now as they approach a stop. Desoto is still level. Actually, Desoto has accomplished an 85% reduction in front-end brake dip. That means better driver control and more comfortable stops. Now, you know how most cars squat on takeoff? That's been practically eliminated in a Desoto. They did it by mounting the rear axle only about 1/3 of the way back on the rear spring. And because the forward portion of the spring is stiffer, it keeps the axle from winding up on sudden starts. But here's the test. Notice the position of the rear fenders in relation to the wheels as the drivers watch for the signal to start. And they do start. And Mercury's fender drops way down on the wheel. In other words, it's squatting on takeoff. But you'll notice that the Desoto isn't. Next, would you like to see some acceleration tests? Okay, let's turn the record first. Now you're going to see some real action, some real evidence of Desoto's superior performance. But first, let's take a quick look at the engines on these two cars. The Desoto Firedome V8 engine has 270 horsepower from a 341 cubic inch displacement. The compression ratio is 9.25 to 1. The Mercury has 255 horsepower and 312 cubic inch displacement. And the compression ratio is 9.75 to 1. But there are a lot of other important differences between the two engines. Inside, Desoto has the hemispherical combustion chamber with an extra long spark plug tip sticking down into the chamber. Mercury's chamber is wedge-shaped, and its shorter plug is off to one side of the chamber. So it's no wonder the fuel in the Desoto chamber is fired more quickly and more evenly than the fuel in Mercury's chamber. And the Desoto will keep its new car power a lot longer because the hemispherical chamber resists the buildup of carbon. Carbon can collect in the Mercury chamber and cut power and make the engine knock. But now, let's look at the difference in performance. Here's an acceleration test from 0 to 60. There goes the flag. Desoto jumps ahead immediately and increases its lead all the way. The driver raises his arm to show he's hit 60, and Desoto is in front by over 2 car lengths. Well, you combine a fire dome engine with Desoto torque flight transmission, and you get plenty of action. Incidentally, Mercury copied us this year and came up with a push-button selector. But the transmission wasn't changed, so there are some important differences between torque flight and Mercomatic. For instance, Desoto torque flight always starts off in low and uses engine power more efficiently. The Mercomatic driver must either shift or kick down on the accelerator to get the advantage of low gear. But the test you just saw was run with the Mercury shifted to low because they'd been getting a lag, a slow start in the Mercury when they just used the accelerator. And Desoto gets a faster start because the breakaway ratio with torque flight is 6.6 to 1, while Mercury's is only 5.04 to 1. By the way, Mercomatic has a parking tab that engages a parking pawl in the transmission. Evidently, they don't trust their integral parking brake too much. But if the Mercury is pushed while it's parked, the pawl can break off and cause expensive damage to the transmission. An independent parking brake like Desoto's would prevent that problem. However, Mercury doesn't have one. But now they're going into the 40 to 75 mile an hour acceleration test. Both cars are even at 40 right now. And there goes the flag. And Desoto jumps ahead. And it's ahead by half a car length. And now a full car length. And Desoto maintains that edge. And now Desoto hits 75 miles an hour way out in front. Now in this next test, a passing test on a 7% grade, you'll see why that edge for Desoto is so important. Right now, both cars are going 40 miles an hour. The car in front will maintain that 40 mile an hour speed. See those 2 signs? That's where the Desoto will start to pass. And there's the Desoto pulling out to pass. Now Desoto is drawing even with the other car. And Desoto has passed it at the flag. That's the 300-foot mark. Desoto pulls in lane again well ahead of the other car before reaching the man who is standing at the 400-foot mark. Now let's see how Mercury looks in the passing test. Again, the car in front will maintain a steady 40 miles an hour. Mercury pulls out to pass at the same place. And now they're almost at the 300-foot mark, and Mercury is still not quite even with the other car. And there's the man at the 400-foot mark, and Mercury is still on the wrong side of the road. And Mercury finally pulls in after using about 100 feet more of the wrong side of the road than the Desoto did. Yes, sir. Anyone who wants safety in highway driving will certainly appreciate Desoto's superior passing ability. Don't you agree? Of course, even in a Desoto, you wouldn't want to pass on a hill like this 32% grade. That's as steep as they come anywhere in the country. We're going to see an acceleration test up this grade. Down at the bottom, you see the Desoto and the Mercury. The Mercury driver has pushed in the low button again, while Desoto will take this in drive range. There goes the flag, and Desoto leaps ahead. It takes a commanding lead as it reaches the 32% grade sign. And now Desoto is 3 car lengths ahead, and now, Desoto is so far in front that we couldn't get them both in the same picture. How do you like that? That's a test every current Mercury owner ought to see. In fact, there's so much difference that maybe you're wondering about the condition of the Mercury. Anyway, the Ross-Roy test crew wondered after they'd run that hill climb test several times with results like you just saw. So even though both cars had been tuned before the road tests were made, The Mercury was taken back to the shop and put on a chassis dynamometer. It showed that the Mercury was above factory specifications in power output. So then we went back and made the hill climb that you saw in the photographs. And if he lives in hilly country, he might like to see this next test. Now we're going to send the cars down that hill and check them for engine braking. So here they come. Both drivers have the low button pushed in, and neither is touching the brake or the accelerator. And look, already Desoto is holding back by half a length. That's torque flight, locked in low, working for the Desoto driver. Now there's a full car length between them, and Mercury is really rolling. You see, at about 18 miles an hour, Mercomatic allows an upshift, so there's less engine braking power. And at the bottom of the hill, Mercury begins to roll right out of the picture. Of course, anybody who's interested in safe control of his automobile should check into Desoto's total contact brakes. Let me tell you about them. In the first place, Desoto brake drum diameter is 12 inches, while Mercury's is only 11 inches. Desoto comes out to 251 square inches of brake lining, and Mercury to only 212 square inches. That's a whopping 19% more brake lining area for Desoto. And in Desoto brakes, the entire lining area contacts the drum whenever the brakes are applied, total contact. Competitive brake linings, including Mercury's, are apt to make only partial contact with the drum. The Desoto shoe makes total contact with the drum from top to bottom of the brake shoe and across its full width. You see, Desoto brakes have floating shoes which are guided by support plates and move outward evenly. This results in total contact. But Mercury's brake shoes pivot around an anchor, and these anchors cause the shoes to make only partial top-to-bottom contact with the drum. And they don't have anything like the Desoto support plates for perfect contact across the full width. And of course, Desoto brake linings are bonded to the shoes, while Mercury's are riveted. So Desoto linings will give the owner 2 to 3 times more mileage than Mercury's. It's been proved time and again that Desoto brakes give you quicker stops, longer lining life, easier braking, and more reserve braking power. Now, Mercury prices weren't available when this film was produced. But check them. See if the Fire Dome isn't priced below the Montclair. And see if the Fire Sweep isn't priced right next to the Monterey. Then ask yourself this. With all the advantages this great Desoto has over Mercury, selling advantages like styling and size, and performance, as proved by the official photographs of certified road tests, with all those selling advantages, shouldn't Desoto be demonstrated to every Mercury-owning prospect? We know about Desoto superiorities. Let's make sure prospects know about them. And Desoto will convert a lot of Mercury owners for us in 1957.